there is the risk for Biden that it gets sort of beset on all sides because there's a progressive wing of the party, particularly in the House.
He is being attacked by Republicans, but they're also having their own sort of internal party clash on the campaign trail as well about how to deal with Israel and like former President Donald Trump's statements about it as well. So it's just a moment in time, like a human moment in time and a political moment in time that's, that we're sort of seeing unfold.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by White House reporter Naomi Lim. And Naomi, the White House keeps talking about these split screens, and they're trying to show themselves doing lots of government-y stuff, presidential stuff, leadership stuff, and House Republicans, maybe not so much.
Less government-y, probably. Yeah, it's been this interesting contrast that they've been trying to build, and it's sort of evolved over the past couple of weeks. First of all, we had the speakership impasse, and so that was a very clear differentiation that they wanted to draw between, the White House, President Biden being adult, and the House Republicans not being able to figure out who their leader is. Right. It sort of evolved against the backdrop of the Israel war. We sort of saw this interesting decision when it first broke out where, the Biden administration was still pushing the president's economic policies.
Right. And
he was sort of criticized for,
junk fees
and things like that, reducing energy costs, and which are important in the broader scheme of things. But in that moment of time, people were sort of saying, why are you doing this? Right. Their argument is that they can chew gum and walk at the same time, right. that old chestnut.
And just don't leave it on the ground.
Exactly.
We'll get in people's shoes.
We don't want that.
Yeah.
Gumming up the system more. We don't want that.
Indeed.
But it's been kind of interesting that they, I think, realized that with the likelihood of a ground invasion, a very long ground invasion by the Israeli Defense Forces into Gaza,
right.
that potentially now is a time to sort of step back, maybe take an eye off domestic policy for 2 seconds and sort of figure out this big picture, because obviously the Jewish community is hurting, the Palestinian community is hurting, and so trying to figure out how to weave those things together. But it's kind of been interesting. I thought maybe that they would back off the split screen push just because of the nature of what's going on overseas, but we're seeing now, because the continuation of this lack of a speaker, that they've pushed out sort of memos, basically saying that House Republicans should join Biden at the adults table.
Right.
And that's sort of to contrast with a primetime address that Biden, his second one of his administration, dedicated to Israel as well as Ukraine, because the funding is going to be needed for both of those things, and they can't do it without a functioning Congress.
Right, and so, funding for Ukraine is something that has divided Republicans, but funding to aid Israel, particularly in a time of need like this, has been considerably less divisive among Republicans. So I think the thought process might have been that would be an impetus to resolve this impasse, but it really hasn't been.
No, but I think the other thing that the Biden administration is very mindful of is, while Ukraine funding is divisive potentially on the Republican side, Israel funding is maybe a little bit less so, but we're seeing sort of fissures emerge in the Democratic Party about how defensive the administration should be of Israel. We're sort of seeing very tentative language from the White House, sort of saying, Hamas is not the same as the Palestinian people. There's a dividing line, and really pushing this need for humanitarian aid,
right.
And trying to sort of weave this fine line. But we're already seeing sort of a State Department official publicly resign over this idea of blind support to Israel. So he has to be it might not be as hard and fast as the Ukraine funding argument, but there are nuances that he has to keep together with this sort of wide Democratic base that he has before next year's election, but also just to deal with the problems at hand.
Sure. So as you say, there is the risk for Biden that it gets sort of beset on all sides, because there's a progressive wing of the party, particularly in the House, that is, out of their support for the Palestinians, does not like the level of aid that Biden wants to commit to Israel. And then you have sort of the situation where you have Republicans running against Biden for president who want to portray him as not really being that different from these progressives.
Exactly. And so this is while he's trying, I think he personally, there was reporting about how he changed, he's been praised for his remarks by being sort of very staunchly pro-Israel, but there was...
And he's been to Israel.
Exactly, of publicly, literally embracing Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But I think there's this idea that, and I think there was reporting that he wanted original, original speeches straight after the terrorist attacks maybe sort of were a little bit wishy-washy, and he made it more strident.
Right.
So he does personally, I think, lean a little bit more moderate, centrist. This is like the Biden that we've seen through different campaign trails and through his presidency.
He's that generation of Democrat where the party was more holistically supportive of Israel.
Exactly. But there is this rising, flank within the party that is a little bit more critical of Israel, but in a way that, they have. It's just a very to say that it's a complicated issue is very understated, or it's like doesn't quite grapple or explain the situation very well.
Sure.
But yes, he is being attacked by Republicans, but they're also having their own sort of internal party clash on the campaign trail as well about how to deal with Israel and former President Donald Trump's statements about it as well. So it's just a moment in time, like a human moment in time and a political moment in time that's, that we're sort of seeing unfold.
Right. So even in a time of international crisis, U.S. domestic politics are never very far away.
Exactly.
Thank you, Naomi. You can read Naomi and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.